Hey everyone, we're at CES 2017. I think this is our maybe almost third day now. We're here at the Gigabyte suite, but this is the Brix VR. This is a new Gigabyte complete system, pretty small. It has a GTX 1060 in it and an i7 7700K, so that'd be Kaby Lake. We're gonna be taking this apart. The inside is pretty cool. The thermal solution I think is definitely interesting. I haven't tested it, but it's pretty unique. So we'll take that apart. Before getting to that, this content is brought to you by CyberPower and their Cyber Gaming XL system, which has an invertible motherboard layout, and you can learn more in the link in the description below. So for the outside, pretty small shell. All of our I/O there's your video out I/O, and then there's your USB and audio and things like that. Flipping it over, this is the bottom side, and it's just got 4 screws in the bottom, so that's pretty trivial to do, of course. Get all 4 of those undone, and then once we open it, it actually unfolds in a way that reveals the CPU and GPU separately with custom cooling solutions. Okay, so that's removed, 4 screws, and it's got some clips. You can see the inside now, there's the cooling fan, just one fan for the whole unit, and again, that's at the bottom. So the intake is coming in through these sort of chamfered edges around the base plate that the screws connect to and that it sits on. So you got your intake there. I'm not sure the size of this fan. It looks like maybe a 92 or 100 millimeter or something like that. Okay, so the next part, this slides apart like that. So we've only taken out 4 screws so far. And there's the rest of the shell with the video out from the GPU. Set that aside. Then internally, there's a couple loose cables because this is CES and it's been taken apart a few times, but internally there's the GPU cooling solution and CPU cooling solution. This one is for the CPU, and the other side, which has the video out ports to make it obvious, is the GPU cooling solution. So flipping it over, we've got 2 screws here, one near the cooling fan, and then one is deeper in this cave. Once you get those 2 screws out, this just completely separates, pulls open like this, and there's your power cable. But once it separates, you can see the heatsink solution, aluminum fins, there's a single copper heat pipe, and I believe a copper base plate, but we'll look when we take it apart. And this is the GPU cooling solution. And the CPU one we'll look at in a moment, but just for a preview, there's the CPU cooling solution. Both of them you can see have this one has larger fins, but the GPU solution is a little different in that to get some extra surface area, the fins have somewhat of a bezel outward, and hopefully that picks up on camera. And this is on all of them, so it proliferates through all the fin stack, and that gives a bit more surface area to dissipate the heat. There's a single screw dead center down the middle, so if we wanted to take the heatsink off the GPU, that's where we'd start. And then there's a ton of thermal pads underneath this from what I've been told. So in theory that helps with the heat buildup in such a small unit, because again you're relying on a single fan to cool this whole thing. And our exhaust is exactly the same as the intake. So for the exhaust, you've got just this small chamfered edge where the air escapes. So that means there's a lot of heat to dissipate in a small space. I'd have to test it to know more. There's actually a bunch of thermocouples chopped off in here from their R&D team, so it's definitely been through some testing. Let's pull this CPU portion out and then maybe look at the heat sinks in more depth. I basically took out an M2 SSD, or maybe a dummy one. I'm not sure if that's even a real SSD. It is a real SSD. Took out an M2 SSD, and that uncovered the wireless card. Then we disconnected the antennas, and now this should slide out, I guess, once I disconnect that power header. There's the rest of the shell. Nothing too special once it's all bare like that. Let's put that aside. And here is the memory, obviously, M.2 port, your wireless card, a couple of inductors, and then the I/O, and then the other heatsink. So that'd be the CPU heatsink at this point, and it's got Brix branded chokes all around it with a couple MOSFETs as you would expect. So that's the basics of the cooler. I'm curious about one thing. I want to take this one off just because it is a GPU cooler. GPU's got a bit warm. Let's see how complex this is. Cool. Okay, there we go. So it's actually still got thermal paste on it. This is the underside. We've got a copper cold plate. It is actually protruded, which, as we've shown in some of our testing, is normally a good thing. So it's a protrusion for the copper cold plate, or actually looks like it might even just be a solder layer between that and the heat pipes. I was wrong about the heat pipes. There are actually two of them. So there's one heat pipe on the perimeter here, and that is going over the VRAM if you kind of lay them out next to each other. That heat pipe is contacting VRAM, and it's contacting either the capacitor bank over here or the chokes for the VRM. And then the inner heat pipe is, let's see, inner heat pipe is just it's helping with the GPU cooling, and it looks like the other part of the VRM. So that's the cooling solution from the underside. Fairly substantial given the small form factor. A lot of thermal pads as advertised, and there's actually, maybe you can get a zoom in on this one potentially. There's actually an aluminum plate that's, again, it looks like soldered to the rest of the aluminum plate, and then the thermal pad on top of it, and that is in fact what is contacting the capacitor banks from the looks of it. And then you've got a couple of others for outlier FETs, and then some giant clay pasty thermal pads for contact with the VRAM actually. So that's the VRM cooling right there. VRM VRAM, and then GPU, capacitor bank, and chokes. So that's the entire cooling solution for the small form factor system we just took apart. gamersnexus.net for the full coverage, articles, all those things on CES 2017. And thank you for watching. As always, subscribe for more. Patreon link in the postal video for more information. I'll see you all next time.